Hi guys, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Tonight's session is on Sequence Generator Pro, and we have Ken and Jared here to go over it. But before we get to that, uh, the image spotlight goes to Brian Odom's Horsehead Nebula. It's a beautiful image, and I'm going to pull it up on my screen, and I'm going to give Brian a few minutes to talk about it. Uh, There we go. I hope you guys can see that. I believe you can. And Brian, you're still muted, so go right ahead and give us some details on the image.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. This is a kind of an interesting shot because I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of screw-ups, but it came out pretty well. Um, I believe I took it about the 17th and 18th of February, and I've been doing astrophotography for about 10 years, and it was only about a year ago, though, that I pushed all my chips to the front of the table, and I got a remote control observatory set up in the desert of New Mexico. So this was one of the first images I got this year on it, and it was about, let's see now, I got 40 separate subframes of 10 minutes apiece. And feel free, folks, if you want to type in a question. I do have the question pane, and I can see that. But so it was about 7 hours of exposure. So that's probably one of the longest I've ever taken. So maybe that's why it is pretty good. It's because I got a lot of hours. But oh, you probably want to know about the equipment. Okay, Canon 5D Mark III. And of course, you see all the red there. Well, then that means I had it modified. I believe I had it modified by Hutech. They did my earlier camera a few years ago. So it's a Canon 5D Mark III, and it's on an old Dob. Believe it or not, it's a 10-inch f5 Dob that was born in Taiwan, but it was pimped out for astrophotography. And taken off its Dob mount. And out there in the desert, it's on a Paramount MX. And I use the wonderful PhD and the Starshoot auto guider. And let's talk about some of the screw-ups. I took 10-minute subs, but I only had 5-minute darks. So I had a lot of problems to fix up there. A lot of hot pixels, perhaps. And so that was one mess up. I don't have the proper darks for 10 minutes. I've been taking 5-minute darks or 5-minute subs for all of the time. Another thing about this is I don't have a rotator, and the telescope's located about 1,800 miles from my house. So I'm not able to rotate the image. And so this is actually a sideways crop. So I had to crop out about 2/3 of the full frame. But other than that, I just use a lot of the simple techniques. I've always, people call me the lazy astrophotographer because I always like to do the easiest way to do things. I never wanted to do anything like no dithering, no CCD, no filters, no adaptive optics, and no rotator. But I use Images Plus, helps me calibrate. But I find that program's a little bit hard to use for your final processing. And so I just use Photoshop and curves, 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 curves. So that's the short thumbnail description, and I'm happy to answer any other questions if any time is remaining. Oh, the question just came up from Dylan about the diffraction spikes. Well, this is a reflector telescope, and so it's got the cross spikes that hold the secondary mirror, and so that's how I get the spikes. It comes for free. And you know, Hubble has spikes, so it's kind of nice to have spikes. But I certainly respect folks who don't like the spikes because they are, if they're a refractor person, you don't have those spikes. But yeah, the spikes came for free. And me as a perfectionist, I see if you look carefully, the spikes aren't perfectly symmetrical, meaning my collimation is not perfect. But that's how you get the spikes. They come for free with the system, although if you want them in your pictures, you can get different software or plugins for Photoshop that'll put spikes in your pictures.
Thanks, Brian. It's a beautiful image. We are going to have Brian back because he accomplished an amazing feat. He and his team photographed the entire Messier list in one night. So we're going to have him back in a few weeks to discuss that. But thanks for sharing this image with us, and thanks for that description. If there are any other questions, feel free to ask him, and we'll get to him later on in the show if he's around. Otherwise, post him in the comments, and we'll get him to him. And right now, I'm going to jump right over to Ken and Jared, and you guys are welcome to take it away.
Okay. Well, thanks for having us on. Just real quick, you know, I mean, nothing about us. You can go to our website and read about that if you're interested, or you can ask questions. But we're not astronomers. We're software engineers. So don't confuse us if you have any, you know, very in-depth astronomical questions. Some of the points we wanted to make kind of is that, you know, during the design of Sequence Generator Pro, I mean, if you've been there, if you've been around for a while, you've seen it evolve. And so one of the things that we've always tried to keep true to is that we present a program that is easy enough for just about any user to pick up and start using, and powerful enough for almost any advanced astrophotographer to meet most of their needs. So we're going to cover a lot of the important aspects, even get into hopefully some of the more advanced features, and like you said, if we run out of time, maybe we'll table some stuff and do a further session where we have a very specific area of focus for another presentation. But I'm going to proceed, and when I speak, I'm going to talk about terms like plate solvers, autoguiders, focusers, HFR, and a lot of this stuff, I have assumptions that they're understood by the imaging community, but that doesn't mean that you have to understand them. If you don't understand a term that we throw out, please just throw up a question, and we'll do our best to clarify it in a very reasonable period of time. So, you know, let us know if we're moving too fast. Let us know if you want us to kind of stop and focus somewhere, because everything we just said was clear as mud. And, you know, just let us know, see how it goes. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and share screen now. And what I have up is Sequence Generator Pro. And we're going to cover some elements of a basic sequence. So I already have one open, but you see, you know, I went in and I opened a sequence. You can think of a sequence as kind of like a Word file or whatever. It's basically just a document that you're trying to open, and our sequences look like these little red guys, little sun icons that you see everywhere in SG Pro, like that. And so the idea behind a sequence is that you can set it up at home, comfort of your living room, in general, about your general strategy per target, and then you don't have to sit out in the dark and set up an entire sequencing image when you get out there. Basically, all you need to do is open this file, maybe click a few things, and get going. So you can see here that we have, let me turn on my little thing here so you can see my mouse. Right here is kind of where we store equipment. And you can see that by far the most popular equipment that we have, or that any imagers use, are the camera, filter wheel, focuser, and telescope. We do support a lot more equipment than this, but these are by far the four most common things, so we keep them visible at all times. One thing that's kind of unique to SG Pro is that if you're used to ASCOM, we don't show the ASCOM connection box like a lot of other applications do. We basically interrogate ASCOM, and we put all of your ASCOM stuff right here in the same menu. And then we add some things to it like Nikon and Canon and SBIG, which doesn't have its own ASCOM driver. And then you can see here we have basically this is the settings dialog. And that's a terrible camera, but if we chose like the simulator and you want to go see some settings, here's basically your settings for the ASCOM simulator. We're going to go back to a different camera that's going to be better for this demonstration. And these buttons off here on the right, the red ones, these are what you press to connect. So as you can probably see, we're using all simulators here. You might notice this little arrow here at the bottom. This is how you can get access to less common pieces of gear, like the flat box, rotators, observatories. That includes both roll-off roof and dome, and weather stations like Boltwood and things of that nature. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to leave some of this equipment stuff out of here for now. It's like flat boxes and stuff like that. But anyways, let's focus on just these for right now. So, in terms of the anatomy of a sequence, I guess we'll just kind of move hierarchically. So basically all of your equipment is defined in this area right here. And then off here to the left, you can define as many targets as you need or want. This particular one has everyone's 3 favorite targets. You know, a lot of folks like to spend a lot of time on a single target, so it's not uncommon to see a target list of 1. But, you know, a lot of folks like to spend a couple hours here, a couple hours there. A lot of folks like to search for supernovas, so they have 250 targets, and you know, whatever you need. But so this gearbox right here is for target settings, which we'll look at momentarily. And these checkboxes here are whether or not, when you run the sequence, the actual target should even be considered. So in a case like this, we would only run Rosette and M42, and we would skip Horsehead. But we're going to go ahead and turn Horsehead back on. This little icon right here means that the target is in a paused state, meaning that it's not running. It will actually change to a little play arrow when that target is running, so that it's easier to tell which particular target is being executed. Okay, so you can add new targets here, and you can also get rid of them just the same. And then you can change the order of your targets with the up and down arrows. So that's basically it for targets. We're going to get into settings in a little bit, but I just want to right now bring up the general notion of multiple targets. So let's talk about the anatomy of an event. So each target, and what I mean target, so you notice that there's Rosette here. Notice that Rosette has four events Each check to run, each is light, and then you can see that it's got red, green, blue, and clear, or luminance. And each has its own exposure time. Each has its own binning level. As a lot of folks like to do, the colors are binned 2 by 2, and the luminance is 1 by 1. And then how many times you want to repeat that particular event. And then you can see here with the X over on the side here that you can actually delete an event. You can move the event up and down with these little arrow guys. If you decide you wanted to move Loom to the top, you could literally just click up, and you can see Loom moving up, or you can move it back down to where we had it to begin with. But anyways, so you can see how that works. And if you decide that you just want to skip a particular event right now, you don't want to worry about reordering it, you can, of course, just uncheck it and it won't run it. So these are basically just characteristics of events, and you can see that each event has its own options too. I'm clicking right here, actually. And so right here, you can copy all of the fields from another event in this target. You can push these events from this particular event to another event. You can reset the progress of just this event if you want. But this one's kind of important too, because this is kind of a point of confusion, is that when people get through some partial sequences, and they go over here and they press this run sequence button, sometimes they're a little bit confused as to where it's going to start. So if before you start your sequence you want to set a particular event as the current event, we could just click this for event 3, which is our blue, and we would start the sequence with event 3. And then it would cycle. After that, it would go to 4 to Loom, and then come back and finish up the red and green. So you do have the capability of customizing that. And then you can go to the event settings, and we have some pre and post options. So pre is what would you like to happen before event 4 starts happening? And there are some stuff that are events that are not super common, like parking your telescope. Why would you want to park your telescope before an event? Well, some folks like to have the, if I added a flat type down here, I might choose now to go over to my event options and settings. And pre-park, so now you can see the little dot over the that little telescope there. That means that after this light event, it's going to go ahead and park the mount and then run this flat event, or you could do darks or bias or any of that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off because we don't really want to run that. Okay, so the rest of this is you can choose to pause the entire sequence with a custom message, either before or after an event, and then run autofocus when you resume, or manual focus. Those are just popular things. This is not a very popular feature. This is for people who want to do really custom things, like create an example might be to query one of your ASCOM devices for a particular property and write it to some spreadsheet or something, and you can do that before or after an event. And right now you can't do it per frame, and we may add some stuff like that later, but we got a lot of stuff in the backlog. Here, again, you can reset the progress of the entire event. So this little exclamation guy is a notification. These are empty right now, but if something terrible happens to one of your frames, like the sequence tried to recover itself, or a cloud passed and guiding decided that it didn't want to work anymore, we would log that here for you, and this this exclamation point here would look like this one here, meaning that this particular event suffered some type of catastrophe. And it could just be a warning that Sequence Generator Pro just is noting for you, and there's no real problem, and it recovered it and moved on. So, all right. You can add new events down here. You can copy them from existing events if you use that little side button, or you can just add a blank new one, and it'll add a blank one that looks just like these things. Likewise, you can delete an entire event if you want to delete 5, or add it back, and then there you go, it's 5. You can see it's very blanky. So, all right. So, little weird UI bug there, but no big deal. It doesn't really affect anything. That line disappeared at the bottom. So here's some target status stuff. Here's some information about the sequence. This is if you want to insert delays before the sequence starts, or if you need to insert delays between each frame for some particular reason. This is because we don't know everything about everyone's setup. Usually we can accommodate for most things that you would need to use this for. Like some people were using this for mount settling times without knowing that we actually have a property for that. The event order right here is you can either rotate through events, meaning that if you press run sequence, it will take 1 red, 1 green, 1 blue, 1 loom, and then start over again until everything is done. Most people prefer finish the entire event first because it cuts down on the amount of time required to capture a sequence due to having to change the filter every single frame. But if you think you might have a limited amount of time because of some weather system moving in, and you want to make sure you capture at least some data from every frame, it might be, or sorry, from every filter, that might be an option for you. All right, this is the basics of the sequencer window. Any questions on this stuff?
I haven't seen any come through yet.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to cover data real quick. And data, meaning that, I mean, the only reason you're using this is to capture image data. And we have this really cryptic looking file name up here, but luckily we have this handy little key. You actually can move this out of the way while you type. And this helps you specify what you want your files to look like. So if you went up and you found FT, you would see that that's frame type, so that means light or flat or dark. So that means that I am going to keep all of my stuff in this thing right here I call temp images, and that's just because this is not my imaging computer. And then underneath temp images, you'll see folders called light, and I'll go ahead and show you that here real quick. Let me see here. All right. So here's, you can see dark and light, and then light you see a bunch of frames that look like the BN. Sorry, that's a carryover from a very old sequence. The actual new one is TN for target name. So you can see that BN will also work, by the way, if you haven't guessed. You can see that up front you have things like M42 or horsehead, followed by the exposure length. 5 seconds. That is totally unrealistic. This is obviously a test frame. Followed by the binning, which is %BI, followed by the filter name, which is blue, followed by the frame number, which is frame 1. And you can see that if there are multiple frame 1s, it'll do this -1. This is a request we received from many users to have smarter naming about this. And this is on our backlog, and one of these days we will get to that. But right now, that's the way it is.
We should probably call out that those things are getting that extra increment because this sequence has been ran a lot in preparation for this. So it's not really normal that you see that kind of behavior. It would normally just be named the actual frame number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yep, it's pretty uncommon if you just cycle through the if you just cycle through the sequence. Unfortunately, if you reset your sequence in the middle of a sequence, you are going to start getting duplicate names, and then you'll start seeing that -1. But it's better than writing over your old data. So, anyways. Okay, so that's pretty much how all your data is saved, and that's that. Okay, so let's talk about the UI for a minute. That's the sequencing window. Everything you see out here where the mouse is pointed, these things are called modules or floating modules. The entire idea behind a module is that it's action-based or gives you ready access to settings that change frequently. So what I mean by that is that we can go into this control panel, and there's a ton of stuff in this control panel that we can look at. And some of this stuff is just not really common, like the need, for instance, to reverse the focuser direction. That's pretty much one of those things that if that applies to your focuser, you set it and you move on and you never look at it again. Those kind of things are not carried out to the modules. The modules are dockable and floating, meaning that you can snap them in place or pull them out and float them. And when you float them, they will actually float over everything. These do have precedence over all other windows. You can even separate these two things from each other and still have them float. Or you can take one and dock it back in here, and you can see it pop in, and then you can redock it just by holding in the middle there and see that all this stuff kind of saves. You can change the order of things. If you want this particular cluster of modules above, you just move it above, and that's as hard as that is. So. Anyways, and then this stuff all gets saved to your liking and preference. A lot of people using smaller computers don't even use the entirety of the right side. They just keep, or left side, they just keep one side with stuff, especially popular with netbooks and things of that nature. There's a lot of modules here. But let's talk about some, let's talk about the UI. I'm going to connect all my equipment. And so I just connected everything, and we're connected to a special camera. But I'm going to go ahead and go to what's called the frame and focus module. And right now this is just taking a 1-second exposure. And this is creating a, this is a fake star field. So anyways, it is a real star field, meaning that the stars are synthesized, but it is not a real picture of stars. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open a previously taken image. This is an older image of part of Rosette. And this is a mosaic, which is why that looks cut off. And you can see here that we've just kind of created this tab-based framework for images. But these images are actually pretty powerful too, just in their UI structure. In that I could take the frame and focus stuff and drag it right here, and now we've split the images, and I can open up another frame. This is an 03 frame, which did not open. Hold on a second. Let me do that. Oh, the disk is thinking about it. Okay, so here's an 03 frame, And if we put that out to 100%, we can, oh, hold on a second, this thing here. So the default behavior is to be able to drag an image around to be able to see it. You can go to the HA one and drag that around as well. So you're at 100%. Okay, so if you want to see these together, you can even just do something like this. And this is getting kind of crazy. I'm just kind of showing some stuff here that can happen. And then you can get as many of these frames as you want. Each image frame has its own menu bar. You can do things like rotate the image, or completely turn it upside down, or auto stretch it, put some crosshairs on it, and then if you right click it, furthermore, you can do some fit to screen stuff so that you can see the entirety of the image, or even calculate half-flex radius metrics on it. Or if you want, you can see the fits headers for it. So anyways, that's just a bunch of stuff you can do with, so let's dock everything back in its normal position so that we can actually have some context of where we are. Okay, so that's pretty much it on the UI. Oh, sorry. I was going to go over this stuff here on the bottom, because a lot of people that use, even veterans of SG Pro, are not quite sure what a lot of this stuff means down here. So actually, if you hover over it, it'll tell you, it says autofocus active. If you left click it, you can actually toggle autofocus on and off. And if you right click this stuff, you can bring up settings for autofocus. This is manual focus. If you do not have an autofocuser, this little thermometer is temperature compensation. This little target means at least one of your targets will undergo an auto-centering routine and get your scope within pixels of where you want it to be. And then some stuff about the scope here. This means that you'll park your telescope when the sequence ends. I just turned that on. This means that automatic meridian flips are enabled, and this is telling you when the meridian flip will occur in about when it will occur. We can't guarantee when the meridian flip will occur. It will be in about 3 hours. And then for the guider, this just tells you that dithering is active, and that's with PhD. And this tells you that there's a feature called frame restart. If your guiding gets all wily or out of control, SG Pro can automatically restart that frame for you. This says that the guider is stopped when the sequence completes, and these are kind of special, and I'm going to leave these out for now. This is called recovery mode, but without getting into detail, if something happens to SG Pro, like a lost guide star or something of that nature, SG Pro, instead of just failing the sequence and you coming back in the morning all disappointed, SG Pro can attempt to recover the sequence for you and restart things in a safe way. Okay, any questions on the UI or interacting? Oh, all these buttons up here, these are of course to turn, I shouldn't say of course, but these turn modules on and off. So.
I haven't seen any new questions, but I want to remind everyone on the YouTube side, type your questions into the Q&A, and we'll get them and call them right out.
Okay. All right. So we haven't even started a sequence yet, but there are some important dependencies that we can certainly get through here in the next 20 minutes that we can get to, because actually hitting the run sequence button means everything's ready, and that would actually just take less than a couple of minutes to go through. But there is some amount of preparation that you need to go through, and the complexity of the preparation is directly proportional to the amount of automation that you have, or the amount of gear that you have. So if you're just using a camera and a mount, your prep is pretty easy. You pretty much just put in a bunch of put in a target and a bunch of events, and you press go, and you're done. But as you start adding things to your rig, like focusers, like flat boxes, like observatories, like weather stations, and plate solvers, and things of that nature, which are all recommended, by the way, because they lend themselves to a tremendous degree to true automation. But they also do increase the complexity of setup. But note that I'm just talking about the setup. Once you are set up, even the most complex setups tend to be as easy as creating a few events and clicking a button. So we'll talk about some things that are very popular with SG Pro, and usually are reasons that people end up buying it. And those things are the fact that we have a fairly robust autofocus mechanism, and as we've been discovering, this routine that we have in place is very robust when it comes to refractors and monochrome cameras. It does start to present some difficulties with very large images. And by very large, I mean like high-grade DSLR large, and especially when things like the Bayer matrix are present, star centroids start to become a little less apparent. That one is going to be easier to fix than some of the other ones. And one of the major hurdles that we have to get over right now is that folks with secondary obstructions, as discussed in the very first part of this particular presentation, have those diffraction spikes, and those are presented from the veins that hold the secondary obstruction in place, and they also produce an artifact called donut stars when you are very out of focus. Finding the centroid of a donut star, while it's not super mathematically difficult, it is difficult to do on a whole image in a reasonable amount of time. And this is creating some problems. So we have to find faster ways to do this that don't cause your SG Pro and the UI to essentially hang for a period of 5 to 7 seconds while we find the centroids of 1,000 donuts on your image. So we're going to work on that, but we do have a lot of folks with secondary obstructions using the autofocus routine very successfully. It just takes a little bit more tuning than a refractor. Refractor is a little bit more forgiving with respect to autofocus setup. So the other primary reasons that folks buy SG Pro are the auto-centering routine. We provide some very, very easy ways for you to get on target doing very, very little. You can use an image from last night. You can use an image from last year. You can use somebody else's image. You can use somebody's link to an Astrobin image. You can use a lot of stuff to get yourself on target without clicking more than a couple of buttons. So we'll show you how to do that real quick. And the last thing is the automated meridian flip, which actually has a lot to do with, a lot in common with the auto centering. There's a reasonable area that appears around the meridian where your scope, and I'm referring to a German equatorial mount, can point to the same target from either the east or the west side of the pier. And it is in that window that meridian flips are performed. So some telescopes, or sorry, what I'm using ASCOM terminology. When I say telescope, that is synonymous with mount, but I'll try to say mount. Some mounts present themselves as a bit easier to perform meridian flips with, and some mounts are a little bit harder, but we haven't quite found a mount yet that can't. Some mounts have very small windows for meridian flip, and some mounts have very generous windows for meridian flips, and we allow you to tune all that stuff. But the bottom line is that you can set some things up for meridian flip and auto centering, and go to sleep, and your mount, assuming that it's well balanced on both sides, or that you have some type of what's the word I'm looking for, or the term for
ease bias counterweight.
That's it. Thank you. Ease bias counterweight setup. Your meridian flips will be performed without you being in attendance. So, all right. So those are kind of the big things. So let's talk about centering first, because that's what a lot of people want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my, oops, I don't know what just happened there, but I'm going to go ahead, I opened up my my sequencing window again, and now I'm actually going to click on the target settings for Rosette, and go ahead and divide this particular setting into the left and the right, because they're kind of important. Everything on the left side, essentially this area here, is a description about this target. And you can see that we have the name here, which is, obviously Rosette. And this is where it starts to get interesting. The center on when target starts, that is the key. That is to automated centering within just a few pixels, or whatever you decide is okay, really. Here is the target's location about, or what. It doesn't even need to be the target's location. It's really just where you decided that Rosette is. And that's what it's going to use as information for auto centering. There are some time constraints, which we really won't get into, but you can delay the start of capture or end capturing of this particular target at these times. And this is also interesting. This is for people that have mechanized rotators between their scope and the camera. But we also, as funny as it may sound, provide manual rotators, also known as your hands. But the rotation of the camera is of particular importance when capturing mosaics. So what will happen if you were using the manual rotator is that you will get a nice big dialog on the screen that tells you how far off target your camera is, and tells you how many degrees and in which direction you need to move it with your hands. This makes sure that your mosaic images will actually line up. This particular sequence pretends that we have an actual mechanized rotator. So we're going to rotate the we're going to rotate to 15 degrees. This is not the positional angle of the rotator. This is 15 degrees in the sky. So that's an important distinction, because those two things are quite different. 15 degrees in the sky could be any arbitrary positional angle on your rotator. Anyways, enough about rotators. Not enough people really use them for me to spend a huge amount of time on it. But let's talk about how do we get data over here. Well, there are some kind of cool ways to do that. Let's say that, remember this image that I opened up? This is a previous night's image. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the crosshairs. And let's go ahead and fit this to screen so you can see what's going on here. If you right-click an image, you get a whole bunch of stuff But one of the more interesting things down here is plate solve. Now, if I click plate solve, I'm going to get this little dialog down here. Plate solvers need hints in RA, declination, and scale, and Elbrus needs a hint in angle. Pinpoint does not need an angle hint. Neither does the astrometry server. I'm using Pinpoint here, but that's just because I have it installed and because I have to use it when I'm synthesizing star fields. But anyways, it pulled this stuff right out of the FITS headers. That's how it knew. If we were to actually cancel this and go back here and show the FITS headers, you're going to see some stuff in here like RA, object RA, deck, and things of that nature. So when you pull up the plate solve window, it pulls that stuff right out of the FITS headers and says this is a scale of 1, 4, 2, 3, and then we're going to go ahead and click solve. And Pinpoint solves it with a confidence level of 412, which is extremely high, and tells you that your scale is 1.42 at an angle in the sky of 294. And here's the actual RA and deck. And so let's say that I wanted to use this solve as where to center for the rosette target. Notice I can pick any of my targets down here. I could set this as the center of any of them. But I'm going to go ahead and check this box. Use these results as the reference image for target. So I click OK. Notice we'll just say this is 6.5 hours. And we'll hit OK. And now if we go back to the sequencing window, we'll see that 6.5 hours is the new location for the RA of rosette. Interestingly enough, let me just show you this real quick. This is a picture of the Wizard Nebula that I took, and I wanted you to see it, not so you can look at my images, but I wanted you to see some of the metadata around here, especially this right here, where I have it highlighted, or had it highlighted. If you find this stuff in an Astrobin image, all you need to do is go in and copy that link that I have up here into your buffer, go back to SGPro, paste it into the reference data, and hit solve. And it says success populating the coordinates. And you can see that now the center of Rosette is now the center of the Wizard Nebula, which is totally incorrect. I was just showing you the point of the whole thing. But I want to show you something else too, because sometimes Astrobin fails to solve stuff. So here's the picture of the Heart Nebula that I took, and notice distinctly down here what it's missing. It has no information on RA declination or scale or any of that other stuff. So if I were to take this and paste this in here, this would yell at me saying that we need to be better at this. I'll tell you that right now. We need to have a better error. But I just wanted you to know what a viable candidate for reference. If you're cruising around Astrobin and you decide you want to center here, just take a look down here at the tech card and make sure that this data is here. If you look at the tech card and it looks like this, unfortunately you cannot use that. So anyways, likewise, I showed you a different way around it, but you can also browse and click any Rosette frame here. I just picked one off the disk. Again, it pulled that straight out of the header, and I'm going to go ahead and solve that. And solves, and it automatically, so this whole right side here is essentially a helper for getting data into these two fields right here. So anything you do on the right gets data into these two fields right here. So I don't care how you do it. If you want to pull some data, an old image up off the disk, if you want to point to someone's Astrobin image, or even if you just want to enter in stuff by hand, you can do it right here. The only thing that matters when you press OK down here is that this is what you want it to be. Okay, so you can see that each of these targets is automatically centering. And I'll show you Horsehead. It automatically centers. That's, I guess, pretty much it. There is a lot of stuff that I'm skipping here to include the mosaic wizard and all of that kind of stuff. But I do want to show you actually running a sequence before we call it a night. And you know, we can certainly come back and talk about maybe dedicate an entire session to the mosaic framing wizard and mosaic and framing wizard, and also to autofocus. That's probably two things that can be covered in an hour's period. But so we have the sequence right here, and everything's set up, and you can see that all of our gear is connected. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect all of our gear, and you saw that happen here. Just to show you that you don't even need to have your gear connected to start running a sequence. So I'm going to put this up here, and I'm going to put this guy down here. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this, this is PhD2. So we got PhD2 down there. And I'm going to put this off here so I can click it. When we click Run Sequence, what you're going to see happen is a dialog box is going to. This is just going to happen kind of quickly, so I'm just going to talk about it. A dialog box is going to pop up, and what's going to happen is that the telescope is going to, the mount is going to try to figure out where it is by taking a picture of the sky and solving it automatically for you, and then syncing your mount's position to the sky. It will then move your telescope to, you guessed it, whatever location you left in here. It is going to continue moving that telescope, the telescope, until, you see the scope centering area right here. It says, go ahead and try it 3 times. Until the error is less than 15 pixels and your rotation error is less than 3 degrees. Those of you who have engaged in narrowband filtering will understand that you don't want to do things like plate solving and autofocusing using narrowband filters because it will take you forever. So in this particular case, you want to go ahead and override the filter with clear. And we'll talk about the blind solve failover at a later date if you choose to invite us back. And so anyways, we've chosen the clear filter for this. So, and then, all right, so let's go ahead and run the sequence. And so there's all our gear that just got connected. So we just made sure that our reference was good. And right now we just took an image, and here's the star field. So what we're doing right now is plate solving, or pinpoint is plate solving. Okay, we got a good solve from pinpoint. Now the actual mount is moving. I don't know where that is. But anyways, the mount is moving somewhere. It's going to that position. The mount is moved. And we just took another picture of a star field, and we matched exactly where we wanted to be. And of course, we're in a simulator, so that's very easy. Now what's going on is that you can see down here it says resuming the auto guider, forcing recalibration, and that's because there was no calibration. So if you see this a little bit larger, you can see that PhD has started calibrating itself. This will be a very quick calibration because it's using a simulator. Your calibration will probably take longer than this. And we are now actually guiding, and in any minute, any moment, PhD will send SG Pro a message that the guider is indeed guiding. And now you can see that we're setting filter red, which is the first filter. And oh, actually, it also happens to be the we're also running autofocus. We didn't talk about autofocus, but you can see it run here, and maybe we'll have more time to get in depth with this a little bit later. But what you're going to see here is a series of images go by with whole image measurements of a metric called half flux radius. And you're going to see a V start to form as we go. We went outside of focus initially, and we got to focus, and now we are going to go inside of focus. And you'll see a nice V intersection start there, and you see the intersection here. And this will auto-close, and you'll see the sequence restart itself. And we're changing filters back, and here we go back to red.
Should also clarify, if you're wondering why that star field that was running autofocus didn't really seem to look like the rosette, that's because this is kind of a lot of man behind the curtain going on with some of the cameras that we're using here. So these are some cameras that we use for our test behavior. They're software cameras, they're not actually hardware, so we're kind of forcing some autofocus frames in there that we've preloaded. And we use this for our testing, and whenever we develop new features, it's a lot easier than going out to the observatory and fighting with gear over and over and over again just to test some features out.
Right. So up here in the histogram area, you should note that there's an auto stretch. The images are being auto stretched right now. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this autofocus run because it doesn't really matter right now. If you cancel autofocus, it will just continue the sequence. And there it goes again. So if we turn auto stretch off, you'll see that the next image that comes up doesn't look so, there we go, it looks more like a star field. And that's because this has a weird image signature. This does not look at all like an image from an actual camera would look like. But it's important to note here that based on the sensitivity of your camera, you can choose low, medium, and high auto stretching. Most people get away with low because they start to see some very bad, because this is using bilinear stretching, so they start to see some artifacts at medium as certain areas of the image become saturated. So low usually does a pretty good job for you. That said, you can customize your own. You can customize your own stretching as you see fit by grabbing your sliders and moving them around and doing whatever you want with them. So anyhow, that's pretty much it. In the sequencing window, like I said, you can see that Rosette has a play on it. See you later, Hytham. And we have a little arrow next to event 3, meaning that we're running blue right now. Last thing I'm going to point out is that you can see this running dither down here. If you look in the control panel under the auto guide, you can see that we're using PhD2 and that we have dither checked and we're doing a high dither, and that when we settle, we're going to go ahead and settle at less than 1 pixel for 5 seconds. So you can see here when this next image starts, I'll go ahead and cancel it so you can see the settling. It's restarting the guider. Okay, selecting filter blue. Okay, settling. You can see right here. It's going to make sure we're less than a pixel for 5 seconds before it starts the next image. Then it's going to take 1 loom image, and then this target will effectively be finished, and you will see it move on to M42. You'll see the guider actually stop. Okay, the guider is stopped. You can see moving to M42. We just solved where we were. Now we're slowing to M42, and now we're moving the rotator. Okay, now we're taking a confirmation image to make sure that we're where we think we are. And we are, so that's going to move on. And you can see that we are now taking the first image inside of M42. Actually, right now it's forcing recalibration, which is in general a terrible idea. But for the simulators that we're using, it's kind of required. So you can see right now that the AutoGuider is recalibrating. There's no need to do this if you've connected to, this is going to fail anyways, but because the simulator hates to be active for a long period of time. Oh, and here's recovery mode. But anyways, that's okay. You guys kind of saw what we were after, and the hour is up. We're certainly willing to hang around if somebody wants to ask questions or talk about any specific feature. And we can work with Adam and David to try to get back on if there's more specific areas that you want to cover. But, okay, I see Brian has something in there. Yeah, so focusing with a narrow band filter. Yeah, so let me abort this just so I can show you some stuff here. Okay, so focusing with a narrow band filter is a pretty terrible exercise. You can, let me mute my phone here.
So it is possible. It really depends on the how restricted your narrowband filter is. If you're using a narrowband filter in front of a DSLR, you're already, like an HA filter clip-in, you're already knocking out, you know, 3/4 of the pixels by using a DSLR. You're only, you know, going to be focusing with 1/4 of the pixels, so it's going to be a lot less sensitive in that case. But if you have wider band, narrow band filters, you certainly can. You just have to up your autofocus exposure. I tried to initially set this up with some Astrodon 3 nanometer filters, and I was having to do 90-second autofocus exposures to get anything that was workable. Even with the Bahtinov mask, I was still having to do about 60-second exposures to get something workable manually. So we generally don't recommend it, but I guess technically it is possible.
So you indicated that you have Astrodon filters. Those are usually pretty restricted. So the recommended method for doing this is actually to focus with your Lume filter. And so see here we have, this is just fake, but we have right here is the Lume filter, and below it is HA. So you can see that you know, we're pretending that these are fairly parfocal. So what we're saying is that when your Lume filter is in focus, you need to move 10 steps out for your HA filter to be in focus. So as long as you have your focus point offsets set up correctly, and these need to be set around the same temperature. You can't set one night and one the other night, and you can't send wet at night and one in the morning. You need to set them all within about an hour of each other, or your temperature fluctuation is going to present false deltas here. But as long as you have those deltas here, what you can do now is come into your autofocus settings, and you can autofocus with some kind of broadband filter. So what we're going to do is say autofocus with the clear filter or Lume filter. And wow, just realized that percent sign crept up there. Anyways, we're going to say autofocus with the clear filter. And once you do that, you can go back into the focus options and you can say auto adjust focus per filter. So the sequence of events that's going to happen here is that autofocus is going to kick off. And it's going to change focus. It's going to change your filter to Lume, and your Lume filter is going to allow very short exposure autofocus, say 5 to 7 seconds. And you're going to build your V every time, and you're going to find your focus position. And once your focus position is found, you're going to change filters back to HA and then add 10 steps to it because that's what the offset was. And then you're going to proceed taking narrowband images in that respect. So that is the recommended method for autofocus with narrowband filters, is actually not using them. That answer your question, Brian?
Ken?
Yes.
Brian, you got your question answered? Okay, Ken, I've got a couple of questions. One is, what's Jared's last name?
Wellman.
Pardon me?
Wellman?
Wellman, W-E-L-L-M-A-N?
Yes.
I have to make up a index, and I couldn't find your last name anyplace. Okay, secondly,
That is in the About box?
yeah, except I'd have to like start up one of my computers that says on it. Okay, great. Thanks. The other question comes in from Andy, it looks like. Yeah. Earlier you mentioned a script hook for events. Do you have a way to have a script run at sequence shutdown?
No. But we do have a, okay, well, here, two things. One, we have a request in the backlog to do this. And second, when we get feature requests like that, the first thing we do is ask why. If Sequence Generator becomes excessively reliant upon scripts, it means that we're not doing something right. It means that we're completely missing the mark. So if we can't cover 95% of what users need a sequence to do within the actual application itself, we're missing something. Now, if you have a super specific need that almost nobody has, we can understand that. We're probably not going to build any features for it because the cost-benefit ratio is just not there. And that's a terrible way to say it because we're not really doing this for money. What we're doing this is so that it benefits a majority of people who actually do or actually are involved with astrophotography. So I guess better than using a cost-benefit analysis term would be just using a, how many folks will use this type of mentality before we actually stick something into the backlog. So, yeah, so to answer your question, no. More specifically, what do you need done at the end of a sequence that we're not doing? And then, we'll take a look and see if we want to add stuff at a later date. I'm going to shut this off until we need to point back to it again. But that was, who was that from again?
That was from Andy Galasso.
Oh, Andy. Yeah, Andy can just talk to me.
He knows the answer to that. He's just trying to get his.
He's just trying to sneak that in there. All right.
Andy's one of our moderators on the forum.
Well, yeah.
So, and author of PhD too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, one of them.
He was on with us a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. So from Alex in the group chat, first of all, I want to put a plug out for Alex. Alex wrote one of the best user tutorials out there for SG Pro, and we have that up on our support site right now if you want to read through it. But his approach was essentially to break down using the Sequence Generator Pro in, I think, 5 to 7 days. And it prevents kind of information overload, allows you to digest SG Pro in smaller increments and not become overwhelmed. We try to make this as simple as we can, but I mean, let's face it, astrophotography is not a simple activity. There are a lot of things that have to work in harmony. And Alex did a great job of breaking that down. So thank you very much, Alex, for providing that and allowing us to link that off of our support page, which is where you can find it, by the way, if you're looking for it. But
Thank you. And I do plan to update that when I get around to it. I just have to actually update my Sequence Generator Pro to the latest edition, learn how to use it. One of my questions later on is going to be what much has changed. I don't see much has changed so far, but we'll ask that later.
Okay.
Has the filter setup changed? The filter setup screen?
No, I think you had mentioned something about simple offsets.
Yeah, I thought you used to have just offsets in it.
No, we've always had focus points. Well, I was using air quotes, but Ken just flipped back to the Sequence Generator Pro. Anyways, no, we've always had the actual focus points. I think since before this was even known as Sequence Generator Pro.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the idea there being that they provide more benefit than just an offset. So if you go and you do a focus for the red filter in the control panel, it'll actually move it to 25,020 steps instead of, if you rack your filter in at the end of the night,
yeah,
or you're just setting up. We wanted to be able to get you back to that spot, and offsets don't actually contain enough information just to do that. So we actually have focus points, but those focus points are actually treated like offsets for one another within a sequence. So if you do focus for clear, it'll move it back to the initial position. But then let's say you run autofocus, the focus position changes because of your filter, and then you switch filters, and it'll take that offset into account and put you back into focus. And then likewise, if you do focus for HA, if you run autofocus for HA, you should be pretty close already.
Okay.
I have a quick question while you're on that screen, if you don't mind. This set focus for clear. If you click that, does that set the focus point for clear?
Yeah, so that's why I highlighted that, because I thought Alex might be referring to this. Mm-hmm. So if we go over here and we take a look at the current position, which is over here at 25,001, what you can do is set that for, hold on, I can't do that while I'm drawing. Okay, set focus for clear. It says set the focus point for the current filter clear to 25,001, and it is possible that you use this as a baseline for all of your other filters, and you may want to also adjust them by 11 to compensate for temperature. You don't need to worry about that if you just want to do each one with a bot knob mask. You can just ignore that checkbox entirely. But if you say OK, you can go back to your filters, define filter list, and you can see that the clear filter is now set to 25,001.
All right, so if you were setting up your, I don't know if that's the specific way you suggest setting up your filter offsets, but you could do it fairly quickly, running autofocus on one filter, setting focus for that, keeping the box unchecked, and then going to the next, right?
Right, that's why we put all this stuff in here. It's right next to the focus controller where you can do your ins and outs right here. Typically this would be set to more something like this, 10 and 100. Actually, you don't even need this open. We set this activity up so you could do it in modules. Oh no, sorry, you took it out. Never mind. So, anyways, sorry, it's just been a while since I've done this, but all you need is the control panel open, which by the way is this little camera icon here. I've been using keyboard shortcuts, and shame on me for a video presentation, but it's this little guy right here toggles it on and off. And if you go to the focus tab, you can move the focuser in like this, and you can see the focus position over here changing. And you can keep your, you see where the mouse is down here. You can change your filters manually if we want to change to blue. And we've been asked more than once what this big button is. That is not a button. That is a picture of a filter. So if you do set here, you will see that it changes to a blue filter, and so on and so forth. So what you do is you change your filter to blue, you would tweak this in and out with a mask, do whatever you want to do, and then you would set focuser for blue to 22,970, and that's okay. Then you would come over here and change it to red. And there's red, and then you would, tweak your bot knob maybe or bot knob focus by about 10. Then set focus for red and hit OK, and you're done there. And so you can go through and set even all of the 7 most popular filters, and if you just kept the mask on, you could set them all within about 3 minutes, as long as they were mostly parfocal. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it did. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the question from Chris on the autofocus. Why does using full width half max require pinpoint? What's the difference between using that and half flux radius?
Well, so those are just different metrics. Full width half max is a measure of the full width of the half max of a star's flux, and the half flux radius is literally the point from a centroid of the star. So if you take the centroid of a star and you just bisect it, if you start going outward from the center of a star, it's literally the point at which half the flux of the radius at which half the star's flux is contained in. So in order to know those two things, you have to know the centroid of the star, you have to know the flux of the star, and then you have to integrate to find out where half the flux ends, or sorry, the point at which half the flux is contained. So why does it matter? It's a point. Let me just show another thing right here. So you see the focus control right here. You see this little down arrow. A lot of people miss this stuff here. It will actually open this little thing down here. So you go to focuser setting or autofocus settings or focus reminder settings, or it can even take you straight to the help file. But we're going to go ahead and go to autofocus settings. And this half flux radius, that's what we choose because we find half flux radius to be a more robust metric with respect to seeing. But that doesn't mean that half flux, that the full width half max is a bad metric. It just means that we don't support it internally. What it does mean is that we can attach your image to Pinpoint, and Pinpoint can vomit that value out for us. And they are not going to be the same number, but they mean the same thing. They will both produce a V. The smaller the value for half flux radius or full width half max means better focus. Jared, you were going to add something to that.
Oh, I was just going to say that those are just really, you can think of those as metric providers. So SGP provides the HFR metric internally. We don't actually internally support full width half max. So Pinpoint does, and we just went ahead and I guess grabbed onto Pinpoint in that case, and we'll, like Kim was saying, we'll send the image over to Pinpoint. But it's really more who's providing the focus metric than what the focus metric is, and that's kind of why full width half max requires Pinpoint. We don't support it internally, but we support it through Pinpoint, if you will. Personally, I've always used HFR. I think there's a paper out there by the folks that wrote Focus Max, kind of talking about the benefits of HFR over full width half max as well, which is why we chose HFR versus full width half max in SGP.
Yeah.
Is there any speed difference between the two operations?
No, I mean it's insignificant if there is. They're both less than a second.
Okay. But you're saying HFR is more robust, so if I've got bad seeing, it's probably going to get a better number.
Correct.
Yeah, we're again, we are not astronomers, and we have not tested that empirically. Everything that we are telling you is based off of papers that we've read from people that have tested stuff like this empirically.
Okay, thanks.
So, all right. What else do we have?
I have one more question that was brought up on the Cloudy Nights forum the other day. You have something on your website, or I don't know if it's on the help file, about long focal length, autofocus with long focal length telescopes with central obstructions.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have difficulty getting autofocus set up. And somebody took that as kind of the rule that you can't autofocus with long focal length SCTs. And I'll tell you, I've discussed it with a lot of people, and it just takes a little bit more to get there.
Yeah.
And I'm doing just that, and I get perfect V curves with narrowband filters, and it took me a long time to get there. But eventually I got there, and now it's consistent. So is it just strongly worded, but a warning, but not necessarily? Go ahead.
I think maybe we need to be a little bit more careful about how we word stuff like that, but that's exactly right. When I started the presentation, I talked for a few minutes saying that autofocus for refractors, especially refractors, say 1,000 millimeters of focal length and less, very forgiving. You can almost do anything to it. It's way more forgiving in terms of how close you have to be to focus. It's way more forgiving in terms of your number of steps. It's way more forgiving in terms of critical focus zone. It's way more forgiving in terms of the step size. You can abuse the autofocuser with a medium to short length focal length refractor and still get good focus. Like Adam was saying, when you are considering focusing with central obstructions, long focal length, star poor regions, or with a Bayer matrix in front of the autofocus frames, you have some extra considerations. For star poor areas, we have this thing here. This is called the AF sample size, where I have my cursor right here. This is the autofocus sample size. And if you were to take a frame, let me just open up the let me disconnect from this camera. And I'm going to connect to the ASCOM simulator, which returns a picture of M42. So now what you're going to see here is I'm going to go into a frame and focus loop at 1 by 1, say 2 seconds, just so we have some time to talk. I'm going to hit start. Okay, so there's M42 from the ASCOM simulator. If you come up here and you hit this little star button, you'll start to see whole image HFR at work. And if you really zoom in, let's go in even deeper. You start to see that centroids are fairly well placed. There can be a few anomalies, like this guy here, or some things like this guy, or this guy down here. It doesn't really matter, as long as most centroids are actually where they're supposed to be. And what you're going to see is right now we have kind of the sample size kind of pegged, meaning that we can use 100 samples. And this is okay because there's no pot pixels or noise. This image is actually kind of perfect. I believe there is actually even a way to turn the noise on in this camera. Let's see here. Oops. Let's see. Apply noise. All right. So now we're going to see a little bit of variation here. You're going to see junk starting to appear. See how this is flipping around like this? A lot of this stuff is junk pixels. If we were to zoom in much closer, you'd be able to see, first of all, autofocus locking onto parts of the nebulosity. And what we can do here is we can start clamping that down by rejecting more and more nebulosity until we're actually just on stars. That's a little too much. Okay, but you can do that in real time. And the idea is that when you do this stuff, you want to see just stars highlighted. We go back here, we start to see huge swaths of nebulosity actually chosen for autofocus, and that's going to give you terrible results. And that's why this setting is out here on a module, because it varies from target to target. So M42, this requires a little bit more clamping down. Now, the problem here, and again, this is not exhibited on this type of frame, is that especially like out here on the left edge, where you start to see a lot of amp glow and other crap like that start to appear, SG Pro will try to lock onto these things as pixels in starport areas. So when you're in a starport area, and you can see here on the image statistics that we're finding like 47 or 49 stars up here, or 46 or whatever. But let's say we found 46, and that's okay. If you're finding 46 stars and where my cursor is right now and your autofocus size is set to 100, who cares? Keep it that way. It doesn't matter. You're selecting as many stars as we can find, and you don't have any bad data. This meter down here is for when you have 45 good stars, and then you have the rest of the 100 and crap artifacts like hot pixels or amp glow or random other noise caused from who knows what. But what you're going to see is a bunch of real stars selected, and then you're going to see these like clusters of like junk stars selected, sometimes on this left edge or sometimes around the hot pixel areas. Let's see if I can show you some on, let me stop this. So let's see what we got going on here. Okay, unfortunately this one has too much data in it to start selecting bad data. But if we didn't have enough data, see the stars found here, this is if we didn't have enough stars here, you see all these little hot pixels? We'd start selecting those as data if we were in starport areas. And what's going to happen is that you're going to get 45 good stars and 55 pieces of crap, and you're going to get a really bad HFR reading because the noise is overwhelming data. So what you want to do in that case, if you have bad things selected, is tamp this thing down. And I'm going to go back to the frame and focus module and start that again. And you're going to be able to see, so we were on, so we're still on 47, but if I take this down some more, you're going to start to see those things disappear. We're clamping the number of stars down. We've done this so that SG Pro will, the odds are very, very high that SG Pro will select stars over noise as you clamp this down. So anyways, I forgot what question I was answering, but I just went off on rambling.
So I think he was talking about donut stars. So,
oh yeah, how careful you need to be. Yeah, so go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah. So I guess the main things about donut stars is you really just want to make sure that whenever SGP is doing the autofocus routine, that you kind of stay in a bounds so that you don't get pushed to donuts either way. That's really the main trick. So if there's 100 steps of your focuser, wherein you can be in fairly sharp focus, or not sharp focus, but where your refraction pattern doesn't have a donut in it. That's really what you want to use for the window for autofocus inside of Sequence Generator Pro. So maybe use 9 steps or 9 samples with 10 steps apiece, and that'll give you a 90-step window. And then we also have the ability to, in 2.4, we added some new autofocus settings to allow you, we have what's called Smart Autofocus now. It works great for refractors, but it can cause a lot of issues for scopes with a central obstruction. Essentially, if we detect a bad focus pattern, we'll be more reactive to it. So if the trend line continues going up, we'll actually back up the focuser, try and find where the trend line starts going down first. So we're a little bit more reactive. Anyways, you can disable that because it's usually problematic for SCTs and refractors as well. So a couple things at least help out with SCT focus, but it is certainly possible. We do have a handful of users that are using SCTs to image with Sequence Generator Pro. They're using autofocus just fine without any issues.
Yeah, and another thing with SCTs is backlash compensation. At least my Celestron has some backlash in it. If you don't get that set high enough, then it's not consistent as it goes in both directions. Few things to overcome, but when you overcome them, it works well.
Yeah, with the backlash compensation, we really usually just recommend doubling what seems to work. There's not really a lot of bad effects to having more backlash compensation than you need. There's certainly some bad effects if you don't have enough there, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. It wasn't until I boosted it way up until I had success with it. Much, much higher than I would have expected. I think maybe 400 even, or something like that. No, I think 200, but whatever it was, I have big steps.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, if you look at our screen, see those little red lines I drew on there?
Yep.
Those are donut wings.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you see patterns that look like that, with a V in the middle, with little wings on the side, that means SG Pro has done exactly what you probably think it does, is that since what it did was it took, so this last point here where the stars were solid, it was a big fat star. And now to SG Pro, that looks like 2 skinnier stars. Mm-hmm. So your HFR went down here because now SG Pro thinks that you have 2 distinct, separate, smaller stars. And with respect to backlash compensation, I'm gonna hold on. Let me clear that. Okay, so for backlash compensation, sometimes what you'll see is stuff like that. You'll get this flattening. You'll go out, and then you'll get flattening, and then suddenly the gears will engage and start pulling the focus up. Depending on where your backlash compensation is, you may also see the opposite effect of that. But yeah, so I mean, even if you don't think you have backlash compensation, it in theory really shouldn't hurt to use it. And some focus drivers even come with their own. Okay, nothing else on the chat. Adam, is there anything else?
I haven't seen any questions. Now's your last chance to ask any questions if you're out there on the YouTube side. In the meantime, I do want to thank Ken and Jared for doing the presentation. Their software is available just where you'd expect to see it, main sequence software. I'm an advocate. I'm a user. I love it. I think it's just a great piece of software. I'll agree with what Alex posted in the thing, is incrementally learn how to use it, get one thing working, get another thing working, and before you know it, you'll be sleeping while you're acquiring your data. And I do not see any other questions out there. I do want to remind everyone, next week we're going to have a demo of 10-micron mounts by Per Freeval, who hangs out in the Cloudy Nights forum. And they're very interesting mounts, but I will let him discuss them. So hope to see you next week. But for now, thanks for coming, and thanks again to Ken and Jared.